You see that man in the back row holding his little girl's hand? He doesn't belong here. That whisper moved through the crowd like a cold draft under a locked door, and the man standing there heard every word. He always did. He just never answered. Before I tell you what happened at that wedding, let me introduce myself. My name is Grace. I'm 34, and I write down true stories people send me from all over the country. This one came from a reader who says it happened to someone close to her family, and once you hear it, you'll understand why she couldn't keep it to herself. Daniel Foster stood near the last row of white chairs, beneath a glass pavilion overlooking the rolling vineyards of Sonoma Valley. One hand rested lightly on his daughter's shoulder as the late afternoon sun poured gold across the polished floor. Around them, wealth moved like it owned the room. Tailored suits, diamond bracelets, champagne flutes catching the light. Even the flowers looked expensive. Daniel's navy jacket had been pressed twice that morning, but the sleeves still showed faint signs of wear. His daughter Emma's pale blue dress came from a small shop 2 towns over, altered by his own hands the night before, after she'd fallen asleep. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging his wrist. "Do you think the bride is nervous?" Daniel looked toward the aisle, where white roses climbed the archway like quiet prayers. "Maybe a little. If I got married someday, would you be nervous?" She giggled, and the sound was warm and completely out of place among the polished voices around them. A woman in pearls glanced over, then looked away. Daniel noticed. Emma didn't. That was exactly how he wanted it. 5 years of raising her alone had taught him things no one teaches you. How to braid hair with trembling fingers. How to stretch a grocery budget until Friday. How to smile when people looked at him with pity dressed up as kindness. And most of all, how to stand quietly when the world decided you belonged in the background. The string quartet began warming up. Then a voice near the front said, "The CEO's here." Heads turned instantly. Phones lowered. Conversation stopped. Daniel didn't look up right away. He was fixing the ribbon on Emma's wrist. Then he felt it. Not sound, not movement. Attention. The strange sensation of being watched before you understand why. He lifted his head. Victoria Sinclair had just entered the ballroom. Black evening gown, silver earrings catching the sunset. The kind of presence built from boardrooms and headlines and years of never letting anyone see her flinch. But Victoria wasn't looking at the bride's family. She wasn't greeting investors. Her eyes had stopped at the back row. On him. Emma shifted beside her father. "Daddy, the pretty lady keeps looking at us." He swallowed once. Victoria didn't move. And for the first time in years, something unfamiliar crossed Daniel's face. Not fear, not surprise. Recognition. "Do you know her?" Emma asked. "Not exactly," he said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Victoria took one step forward, then another, her heels clicking softly across the stone floor. People parted without being asked. She acknowledged none of them. Near the front, a man leaned toward his wife. "She must know the bride's family." "No," his wife said. "She's looking at someone." Emma watched Victoria approach. "She looks sad," she whispered. "Why do you say that?" Her smile never reaches her eyes. Children notice things adults bury under polish. Victoria stopped in the aisle, still 10 feet from Daniel, still too close to the past. A coordinator approached her gently. "Miss Sinclair, everyone's waiting near the family section." "I know," Victoria said without moving. "Would you like me to escort you?" "No." Then, without warning, she changed direction, walking straight down the center aisle toward the last row. Conversations died. Glasses froze halfway to lips. She stopped in front of Daniel. Her eyes shimmered for just a second before discipline pulled them back. Then she spoke the first words he'd heard from her in 6 years. "You disappeared." No anger, no accusation, just a truth so quiet it made the silence louder. Daniel didn't answer right away. "I didn't disappear," he finally said. "I just went where I was needed." 6 years, Victoria said. I looked for you for 6 years. A murmur moved through the nearby guests. Daniel wished none of it existed. He'd spent years building a life that fit into small corners, a modest house outside Sacramento, early mornings, school lunches, repair jobs, parent-teacher meetings. Ordinary, quiet, safe. Daddy, Emma whispered. Is she your friend? Before Daniel could answer, Victoria knelt slightly to meet the little girl's eyes. A long time ago, she said gently. Your dad was kind to someone who really needed it. That sounds like him, Emma said, smiling. The answer hit Victoria harder than she expected. 6 years earlier, at a snowed-in airport outside Chicago, a 29-year-old Victoria Sinclair had been sitting alone near an empty gate after learning her father had collapsed during a crisis that threatened to unravel the company her family built. She'd been brilliant, driven, and for the first time in her life, completely unprepared to be afraid. She remembered holding a coffee she never drank. Remembered a stranger 3 seats away with a sleeping little girl in his arms and a paper bag dinner untouched beside him. He'd noticed her before anyone else did. You should eat something, he'd told her quietly. My world is falling apart, she'd said, almost laughing at how small his kindness sounded. He'd looked down at his daughter. Mine already did, he said. You still get up tomorrow. She never forgot those words. Not once, in 6 years of boardrooms and headlines and lonely hotel rooms in cities that applauded her success, but never knew what it cost her. Back in the ballroom, Victoria's eyes found Daniel's again. You left before I could even thank you. My daughter had a fever that night, Daniel said. I went straight to the hospital. She mattered more, he said simply. But here's the thing. I thought that was the emotional peak of the story. I was wrong. What happened over the next 20 minutes would change the entire tone of that wedding. Laughter broke the moment. Not loud, not cruel enough to draw immediate attention, just quiet enough to hide behind expensive manners. 2 men near the front had turned toward Daniel. Interesting guest list, one muttered. I thought this wedding was invitation only, the other smirked. Maybe he's the babysitter. Emma's smile faded. Daniel knelt beside her. Hey, you look perfect. Then why are they looking at us like that? He took a slow breath. The room glittered with wealth, crystal, silver, designer fabric. But dignity never wore a price tag. Sometimes people only see what's in front of them, he said quietly. It takes longer to see what matters. Victoria had heard everything. The old instinct rose in her. Not anger, something quieter. Respect protecting itself. A woman approached her. Miss Sinclair, are these friends of yours? Yes, Victoria said. Interesting, the woman replied. Soft voice, sharp edge. Daniel knew that tone. He'd lived beside it for years, ever since his wife passed. At school events, at parent meetings, wherever people asked where Emma's mother was and looked uncomfortable at the answer. Emma tugged his sleeve. Daddy, can we sit somewhere else? I don't think we belong near important people. The ballroom seemed to lose its sound for a moment. Victoria crouched beside her. Sweetheart, do you know something? The most important people I've ever met never sat in the front row. They carried lunchboxes, fixed things with their hands, stayed up all night when their kids were sick. Like my daddy, Emma said. Exactly like your daddy. The whispers stopped. Not because she raised her voice, because dignity has a sound of its own. One of the men who'd laughed stepped forward, awkward now. Miss Sinclair, we didn't mean anything by it. I know, Victoria said gently. That's usually how disrespect arrives. Emma reached for Victoria's hand without thinking. Victoria looked down at the small fingers wrapped around hers, and slowly, like she was afraid the moment might vanish, she held on. Minutes before the ceremony began, a coordinator asked Victoria to take her reserved seat up front, beside donors and executives and family friends. She looked at that seat. Then she looked back at Daniel and Emma in the last row. "Thank you," she said, "but I'll stay here." The woman blinked. "Back here?" "Yes." Emma's whole face lit up. "Then sit with us." Victoria sat down in the plain white chair with its slightly crooked ribbon, and somehow it felt more important than every reserved seat at the front. If you're enjoying this story so far, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Because what happens next is the part that stayed with me the longest. Midway through the vows, the music suddenly faltered. Not dramatically. It simply faded as confusion rippled through the front rows like wind through tall grass. An older man seated near the aisle had gone pale, one hand pressed to his chest. Daniel noticed first. He always noticed first. Years of watching Emma in crowded places had trained his eyes to catch small changes before they became big ones. He stood immediately, handed his jacket to Emma. "Stay with Miss Sinclair." She nodded. No fear. Just trust. Daniel moved through the chairs with calm, steady steps, the kind that tell a room everything will be fine before words even arrive. He knelt beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" "Just dizzy," the man said weakly. "Good. Keep talking to me." He asked simple questions: name, breathing, how long he'd felt this way. The room slowly exhaled, not because the danger had passed, but because calm had entered it. Victoria watched from the back row. Sunlight framed Daniel from behind. No spotlight, no title, just quiet competence. "You've done this before," the older man said. Daniel only nodded, humble as ever. Emma whispered proudly to no one in particular. "My daddy always helps people." Nearby guests heard it anyway. One woman who'd ignored Daniel earlier wiped her eyes. A man quietly stopped recording the ceremony on his phone. Some moments don't belong online. They belong in hearts. Color slowly returned to the older man's face. The bride rushed over. "Dad." "I'm all right, sweetheart," he said. She turned to Daniel. "Thank you." "You should be with him," Daniel said, and stepped back into the shadows without a second thought. Guests watched him return to his seat, but this time they weren't looking at his shoes. They were looking at the man himself. The ceremony resumed 20 minutes later, quieter and more sincere than before. Vows were exchanged under the fading light. Halfway through, Emma leaned toward Victoria. "Do grown-ups always cry at weddings?" "Not always," Victoria smiled. "Daddy does," Emma announced, and Daniel feigned offense while Victoria laughed. A real laugh this time, one that surprised even her. The officiant spoke about choosing someone every single day. Victoria's eyes drifted, almost unwillingly, to Daniel. He'd already done that for years, for Emma, without applause, without witnesses, without asking the world to notice. Something tightened in her chest. The truth had been sitting there for 6 years. She'd just been too afraid to name it. When the ceremony ended and guests moved toward the reception, string lights glowing against the darkening vineyard sky, Victoria stayed still. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "I need to tell you something," she said. Emma looked between them, and even nearby guests slowed their steps, not to listen, just because some moments ask the world to pause. "I've built companies," Victoria said quietly. "I've sat in rooms with people worth more money than I can count, and none of them stayed with me the way one stranger at an airport did." Daniel said nothing. "I told myself I was just grateful," she went on. "That was easier." She looked up, eyes shining. "The truth is, I didn't look for you because I wanted to thank you. I looked for you because losing you felt bigger than it should have." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred, the kind that arrives when someone finally tells the truth. Emma quietly slipped her hand into Victoria's. "That sounds like missing somebody a lot," she said. Victoria smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart." Emma nodded, as if she'd solved the simplest problem in the world. then maybe you should stop losing him. Under the string lights of the reception, hundreds of tiny bulbs glowed above the tables like stars pulled down close enough to touch. People no longer watched the front of the room. Their eyes kept drifting to the quiet man near the railing and the little girl beside him. Emma leaned against her father, eating a slice of cake with complete concentration. "Daddy, if someone misses you for 6 years, is that serious?" "Very serious," Daniel said, looking into the sunset. Footsteps approached. Victoria stood there holding nothing. No phone, no assistant, no polished business smile. Just herself. "You came back," Emma said, delighted. "I said I would stay." "Good," Emma said seriously. "People should keep promises." The bride raised a toast nearby. "Tonight taught me something," she said. "Love isn't always the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes it's the person who stays when nobody's watching." Her eyes drifted toward the back of the room, and this time, no one laughed. No one whispered. The room had learned. Emma pulled a folded napkin from her pocket and handed it to Victoria. On it was a small drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under string lights. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 very small. "Who are they?" Victoria asked. "Us," Emma said, like it was obvious. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Victoria pressed the napkin gently against her palm, like something fragile and priceless. "I don't know what happens after tonight," Daniel admitted. "Neither do I," Victoria said. "My life is small," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, your life is the biggest thing I've seen in years." He didn't need to answer. Some truths don't ask permission. They just sit beside you and wait to be believed. The music started again. The sky deepened into velvet blue. Below them, the vineyard stretched endlessly into the dark. Emma slipped one hand into her father's and the other into Victoria's. No grand announcement. No dramatic confession. Just 3 people standing under the lights while the world moved quietly around them. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Foster didn't feel invisible. So that's the story. A man who gave up everything to raise his daughter alone, dismissed by strangers who judged him by his shoes and his jacket, and one woman who never forgot the kindness that saved her, 6 years and a lifetime later. I'd love to know what you would have done in Victoria's position. Would you have walked away, or would you have stayed in that back row too? Let me know in the comments, and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. If this story moved you, please hit like, subscribe for more real stories like this one, and share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.